I'll mention again that I'm really happy that you're all here, and we haven't, and we actually had Kate scheduled, I think, for January, and then we had a snow event. Kate has been here quite a number of times. I couldn't remember how many, but she is a very fine astrologer and a great person to hear from if you're not acquainted perhaps with astrology, you want to learn more, you're curious. So I'll tell you a couple of things about her. She's been studying astrology since 1969 after a consultation with an astrologer in Brooklyn Heights. She's self-taught, and also she's had the privilege of studying with some very fine and noteworthy astrologers in the field. She is certified by a national organization. She's written for a foremost astrology magazine, has a blog, teaches annually, and sees clients in her home office in Sag Harbor. I asked her if she would bring a list in case anyone wants to sign up, voluntary. You do not have to sign up. If you're interested in learning more or hearing more about what she does, just put your email very legibly on her list. And I think did I ask you for business cards? Yes. So we have business cards too. So please welcome Kate Plumb.
Thank you, Pam. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you, the library, for having me, for Joanne, for helping, and you all for coming. Closer? Better? Here? Okay. I know my my help is in the front row. Yes, as Penn said, this talk was supposed to be scheduled on January 4th, and we're 2 months a little into 2018, so I adjusted some of the but the events that have occurred these last couple of months that kind of feed into 2018. But we'll get right on to it. What's in the stars for 2018? So last year, this is a compare and contrast. This is a Chinese astrology, and we just had the Chinese New Year, February 15th. So this year is the year of the dog. But last year was the year of the rooster. And we look at the traits as Chinese astrology, which I really don't know much about. But we look at the traits, and we can certainly think about last year being the year of the rooster. It's a solitary creature, makes a lot of noise, hawking about, warning, heralding, alarming people, or chickens, Anyway, the tone this year is with the Chinese New Year is the year of the dog. Now the dog, we know, is a very different personality type. Humble, hardworking, loyal, faithful, devoted. But there's also an element in the dog that they're kind of always anxious. There's always a feeling, oh, are you coming home? When am I going to be fed? So there'll be a trait of the dog in all of us this year, both the good and the more challenging aspects. So what you need to know for 2018, all the planets have been moving forward since January 3rd. That's a very rare event, and it closes out March 9th, coming up here pretty quickly. But if you look back, 2016, there were no times when this happened, and in 2017, there was one episode for a month. And this would generally mean that because we're all made up of all the 12 signs, and the planets are organized to rule signs, as they say. You don't have to know my lingo. I'll try to speak it, in English. But you should have noticed a forward movement in almost every area of your life these past couple of months. That things were happening quickly, that, this is happening, that one on top of each other. And that's the result of all the planets in the sky, this rare event for 2 months, moving forward. Even in the relationships and health, family, job, career, home life, friends, children, creative projects, financial matters, things have been moving at greater speed. Now this is going to come to a slower pace here March 9th when the planet of expansion, Jupiter, goes retrograde, and Mercury later on in the month will start. And then the rest of the year always has some area in your life ruled by some planet that's going to be taking a backslide. It's going to be you're not going to be as, the feeling of the momentum moving forward isn't going to be as strong. And that's true for all of us, and it just depends on which department of life that is for you. Now don't get too upset about this, but I just mentioned retrograde, and I just wanted to point out that little loop at the lower left-hand screen, when a planet goes retrograde, that's what we're really saying. Some people get confused in thinking that we say a planet goes retrograde, it stops in the sky and goes, like we have a stop sign or something, and then, you know, the planet stops and goes a different direction. And we're not saying that. It's the planet when it's retrograde. This is just a star map. And this will be important to understand because the retrograde movements this year are quite pronounced, but particularly later on in the year. But if you can see that pink, that loop, the planet is moving. It moves into some area of the sky, the backdrop of the sky, and then it makes a little loop, goes back over the same area, and comes out again. And 3 times it goes over the same area. And that's what a retrograde means, that there's some concentration of energy in a certain department of life for you, the ones I mentioned before, that are, oh, I'm going to rehash, redo, rethink, reimagine, rework, re-edit. And that's important this year because there's going to be a lot of times when planets are going to go retrograde, especially the personal planets later on in the year. And this is what we're saying when we are actually talking about, this is a computer module. It's nothing to do with we don't have a big clicker, do we, Penn? I have to remind you about that because I have to leave the microphone. But anyway,
have a clicker?
You know, the little light, you know, that little blinker light.
We have one in our office.
The one that I can point from here? Laser.
We're going to try to find it.
Oh, great. Because I'm hoping you can follow me here. Because if I leave here, I won't be able to hear. So you'll be here. So, see, the planet Uranus is on that the left side of the screen, and you see Pluto up there. Uranus is in front of Aries. These are not in symbols. This is in English. If you understand a little bit, if you get anything tonight, I'm hoping that you understand what we're saying when we say Jupiter is in Aries or something like that. That's what that concept of what we're actually saying is very important. Otherwise, you can lose or misjudge something. So what we have the zodiacal signs. Now they're actually constellations, right? But these are in English, and they go in a certain sequence. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. That never changes. That sequence never changes. The planets are orbiting the sun. The sun is in the middle. And the planets are orbiting around the sun, and they all visit certain signs of the zodiac. You can see Uranus over here on the left-hand screen in front of Aries. You can see Pluto up there at the beginning of Capricorn. This is actually for the fall equinox in 2012, but it doesn't matter. It gives you the sense of what we're saying. Neptune is in Pisces. Neptune's in front of Pisces. That means Neptune's Pisces. Mars is in front of Scorpio in this chart. You can, if you look back to where Mars is, and then you look behind it, you see that Scorpio is in front of Saturn, is in front of Libra. So this is a moment in time. This is the spring equinox 2012. You have a moment in time when you were born. Every moment in time is completely different than any other moment in time. This is like a breath. Ideally, you took your first breath. Uranus was there, Neptune was there, Venus was there. And this is the pattern that the planets are going to, the planets are moving, they move to this one moment, and you took a breath, or you initiated some project, and then the planets keep going on, and yet that section, that what they do in that your lifespan is what we are deciphering the meaning of. It means something different when you were born with Saturn in Libra than it does if you were born in Saturn in Scorpio. And you're going to have different tendencies. These, especially the outer planets, these are generational. What makes the difference in the generations. Pluto in Capricorn, I was born with Pluto in Leo way down there. It takes Pluto 250 years to circle the sun. It takes Mercury less than a year. So their speed is involved too. But I just wanted you to point out in this chart, Uranus is square, is at a right angle, a 90-degree angle to Pluto in Capricorn up there. That's what I wanted. If you can see that the planets also make geometric patterns to one another. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not going to spend any more time on this, but I'm hoping you get just a gist of what we're saying. You know, your sun is in a Virgo, for instance. Well, actually, we have to transpose the Earth being in Virgo, because we're on the Earth, and it looks as though the sun's up there. So we transpose one or the other. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah. So thank you. That's perfect. So Pluto and Uranus are in this T-square, and Neptune can be doing something to Mars. They're making these geometric, or they can have a sextile, a 60-degree angle, 45-degree angle. They're making a little geometric patterns. So we're under the influence of a long-term, this Uranus-Pluto square that I just pointed out. And these two planets were conjunct in 65. They were together in the sky. Like they would have been up here in Virgo. You would have seen both of them on their different, their paths, but you would have seen them both in Virgo. And so now, since 2012 and 2015, we've had the square of these two planets, and 7 times they became exact. Pluto moves one direction, one speed, and Uranus moves the other, but they form this geometric pattern. And so what was begun in the 60s reaches a tension point when these two planets come to square. And we've had enormous changes throughout the whole world since 2012. And actually, this whole time frame lasts even before 2012. We got the Tunisian fruit seller. That was 2010. When we started that whole business with all the revolutions all over the world. But it will go on to about 2020. We're still under that influence. Pluto is an eruptor. It is a transformer for evolution, and Uranus is a revolutionary, evolutionary, big planets creating big cyclical change, causing or working at the same time. So I mentioned this already. When another planet gets involved in these two, Mars is going to come and get involved in 2018 with these two, and we look for those times, which will be in mid-March. Watch Mars. Things are going to get a little more exciting now, the second part of March, than they have been. I don't know if you can stand it. I certainly feel exhausted. But here we go. And mid-May, Mars begins to come into Capricorn and will start triggering this. That's what other faster moving planets move into this and trigger. So this is some of the positive things, though. This is, Elon Musk's spaceship in February 5th was part of this kind of eruption. Suddenly something comes out, this enormous creative push. And this can happen in your own life. There's awakening that happens with Uranus, and there's a transforming power shifts that happen with Pluto. And when they come together, like we saw in the 60s, huge social changes occurred. And that's what we're in now. So if you feel exhausted, you have reason to be. These are other planetary influences that are affecting us now, and I just put these up. These are from the tarot deck, but this is Uranus and Neptune. You don't see them there, but the tarot is wonderful because you can actually look at the card and feel what it feels like to be having the planet Uranus. You don't have to know anything about Uranus, but you can look at this card and think, oh, I'm on a journey. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm kind of almost free-falling here. I'm going to take my next step, and they're going to be a surprise. And this is Uranus, what Uranus does. I'm a little innocent. I've got my rose and my doggy in my heels. I'm kind of nonchalant, but there's going to be a surprise. And Neptune is this hangman. If you just feel what it feels like to be suspended, not know what's going on, sacrificing yourself, delusional or spiritual, that I'm giving myself up. I'm on the cross of matter, and I don't know what's going on. Let go and let God. Those are energies feelings with what the planets are doing to us. I hate to use the word because it's not cause and effect, but at the same time, we have to feel what we're supposed to be feeling certain experiences collectively. And the planets are very good barometers of that. So this Uranus, they're making an aspect between one another in the sky, and it's in effect from July 16 to March 2021. And these are the exact dates last August, October 7th, these are 2017, and then June 6th this year. It's going to be important if your birthdays are on those dates or if you were born between 71 and 74. Uranus wakes things up, it's like a lightning bolt, and Neptune represents our blind spots. It sensitizes us to the invisible world, or a world of fantasy and or resignation, or resignation and acceptance. The last time these two planets held this angle was September 71 to July 74 during the Watergate break-in and the follow-up resignation of Richard Milhouse Nixon. What does this planetary pair in this degree relationship can speak to us positively? We can look for new ways of healing. Suddenly, there is an eruption of vibratory frequency, unseen healings. Not so much for pills or anything, but through frequencies, sound frequencies. They're using all kinds of, they're experimenting with sound to change people's frequencies, to bring them up. It's like Reiki, the Reiki box from years ago. And all Tesla's stuff. Tesla he was way ahead of his time, and he's much more tuned to, if you want to do some research about him and what he was doing with healing and vibrational frequency. So we can expect these sound waves to cure cancer, diseases have frequencies, and healths have other frequencies. That's what they're experimenting with. And that's human bodies, like notes, musical notes. You have a certain note that's a disease, and a healthy person has a different note. That's a very simplistic way of saying it. So altered states of consciousness will be researched, new techniques for assessing our dreams, because Neptune wants us to connect with a spiritual reality, with a higher, a more visible world. It wants us to connect up there. Now we do that when we play music or we escape to the movies, but in a positive way, when we are most creative is when we are accessing our higher Neptune, our spiritual vibrations. And so this dreams are another way, which would be synonymous with Neptune. Listening to your dreams would be writing your dreams down, paying attention to your dreams would be something that would be very useful now. We're all very, very sensitized now. There's a very strong, you can feel that. Maybe you can feel when someone comes into the room and you don't like that person right away, or that kind of sensitivity you should pay attention to. So channeling and telephony, using more of our brain, possible leap of evolutionary capacity of manifesting more easily. These are some of the positive, they're strange but true, modalities or consequences that you could see here with these two planets making this angle. And this is years long. It's not only this year, just started at the end of last year. Using magnetism, Reiki for healing, scientific studies on Earth's magnetic fields, what's actually making astrology work, who knows? But they're doing research now. Same time, we're becoming more sensitive to Wi-Fi waves. We are discovering ways to desensitize ourselves to the technological devices and using light and sound frequencies for communication. And Pam Gregory is an astrologer, and I took some of that from her. There's also Jupiter, Neptune. Here's planet Jupiter. He's the largest body in our solar system, and here's Neptune. And they're in effect this year. Those are the dates that they strongly connect one another, and then they go off, and then they come out strong again. They become exact, and then they go off, and then they come exact, and that's what all the planets do. And here I gave you a couple more tarot cards here. Here's Neptune again, that hangman. I don't know what's going on. I have to give up, and let go, let God. I can't push my agenda. There must be another aspect of this, a spiritual aspect, which I can't see, and I have to have faith. And then this is the Hierophant, this is Jupiter, this is this dispenser of wisdom. Jupiter was the king, what he's represented here is more like the Pope, but he's the dispenser of goodness and abundance. Jupiter brings, it's the largest planet in the solar system, but it brings good things to us. It makes us bigger, it makes us fatter. We get benefits with Jupiter. And here's what, these are Jupiter expands, what it touches. Neptune is the planet of spirituality and miracles. Our sense of oneness, this is a very important concept for Neptune. We're getting sensitized to the oneness of rivers and what we're doing to each other, and our immediacy has effect all over the planet. We understand whales can talk to each other from oceans apart. We have that capacity as well. And it's time for us to kind of access this. Use the energy to increase your spiritual practice, your creativity, your connection to the divine. Understanding, begin to feel that we're spiritual beings having an earthly experience. So we'll move on to Mars. What's happening here's the Sun and the Earth's orbit, and Mars is outside of our orbit. And what I was talking about retrogrades, Mars is going to go every 2.5 years, it goes retrograde, and it's making a loop, like I showed you with the little loop thing, not stopping and starting again. Mars has to do with our energy level, how quickly we leave the start line, get aroused to anger, become aggressive, get up out of bed, how vehemently we pursue our goals. Now, this depends on your natal Mars is in one sign. Some people, a Mars and Aries person, you're going to know that right away. They have a stronger Mars. A Mars and Pisces person is going to be different. It's going to be more laid back. Oh, let me just dream for a little while before I take any action. And so we have our natal tendencies. That's the important thing to remember here. So, but in general, for everybody, our work, our life force, the force of our life direction, our willpower, how much willpower one person has, it's a vast difference between that. Each individual person. Drive to succeed and our ego strength are governed by Mars. When Mars is going retrograde, that is changing its orientation to the Sun. It's moving from one side of the Sun to the other, from our perspective. It's also closest to the Earth. So it becomes more dangerous if we take a wrong direction. And that's one of the, cautions I would say that during this time, next slide has it, I guess, the Sun is you do not take a new direction. I'll talk about it again. The Sun is the purpose of your life, and Mars describes the will to accomplish your goal. This, of course, can apply to countries as well. The retrograde phase in planetary cycles are like reset buttons. If one direction has not been successful, we try another. But the planets going over the same area 3 times. Here's Mars. It's moving along, and it's moved in this part. This is the section of the zodiac, okay? In this section, it's moved along in this section. You see it, this section of the zodiac. It's moved along here. It's changing, it's going north, south. It's changing its orientation to the Sun, and it's making a loop. It's gone over the same area once, twice, 3 times. Mars will retrograde June 27th to August 28th. So watch for those times. Expect any aggressive action to run into problems. This is just a warning. This is what astrology is really good for, to give you a little heads up. Okay, don't start, you can start a new initiative or new enterprise when Mars is retrograde. It generally means that you lose, because Mars is not connected enough with the Sun, which is the purpose of our lives, to actually make a successful outcome. But it can be quite frustrating. So that time period, June 27th to August 28th, there's confusion, you get delays. It's best to watch for that. And not, you rethink things, you rework things, you do everything with the word re in it. You might have realizations, there are certain activities you're doing that are not serving you, and you begin to take steps to withdraw. You can withdraw with Mars retrograde. Let me step back from things. That's a good thing to do with Mars retrograde. If you're a general, it's not a good time to start a campaign. and that holds for true us as well. You don't have enough energy to have a successful outcome. By the time Mars stations on August 28th, we expect to see some bold power moves then. The heated talk will have led to decisive action. This will have Mars going back into Capricorn. Here's the most intense part of the Mars retrograde period is July 27th. Here's the Sun and the Earth, and Mars is outside us, and this is when Mars is closest to the Earth, and this is the highlight, the midpoint in the whole cycle of Mars going retrograde, and it's the most important point. We also have Venus going retrograde as well in 2018, and Venus is associated with the desire of love and beauty, and our ability to attract and to be attracted, to be attractive, what am I attracting in my life? What do I want in my life? To seek and create beauty, to love one another. And here, it's the same true here. The Earth, Venus is inside of the orbit of Earth, and we will begin to see Venus and Mercury in the sky, in the evening sky now. And you look up for just as the sun sets. You can't see planets in the sky when the sun's out, so you have to kind of see them at dawn or dusk. And Venus and Mercury's not on here, but it becomes an evening star now, and it's going to take a retrograde path. It's going to take a loop, and they're going to go back over territory 3 times. Mars is our willpower, and Venus is our love life. It's our attraction. So these are personal planets. This is going to affect our lives on a personal schedule, a personal level, particularly if we have in that department of life that is Aquarius in the Mars, and here we have Scorpio. Venus is going retrograde in Scorpio. So it goes retrograde October 6th and goes back into Libra. This time what we want in our love life, our desires, our intimacy, the capacity to create beauty and harmony, and who or what we are attracting gets a reevaluation. The important thing to do during a Venus retrograde period is reevaluate. Reevaluate your finances, reevaluate your social life, reevaluate your friends. Come to terms with, okay, is this really important to me? It's a really good thing to do during when Venus is retrograde. You might find an old love relationship comes back. That sometimes happens because Venus is returning. There's something returning that needs to be finished, or you might have a disagreement with your husband over money or values of things. He has some values and you have other values. But the importance of these retrograde periods is that the planets have to connect back with the sun. The sun is the purpose of our life. You hear about Mercury retrograde. I didn't go into Mercury retrograde. That's also the same thing happens, is that it's time for us to backslide. Like we've had these first 2 months in this year, nothing was backsliding. There were no backslides. Now we're going to begin to have, starting in this week, some backslides. So we can, and Venus, but the point of them is to connect with the sun, which is the purpose of our life. So it's not just for nothing. And the retrogrades have a very important value in our life, because when we're taking actions that are not in line with our purpose, and we get stopped, okay, this is not the direction I want to go. And the same with Venus, when it makes a retrograde station, I didn't really want that. This is not important to me. So it's a time for going inward, more introspection. So 2018 is it's a lot about this retrograde. Here's what this is what we're doing here. Whenever a planet is retrograde, it goes forward, it goes apparently backwards and forward again. So it's the same section of the ecliptic, the band of the. Yes?
Does this apply to everybody? We all are of a different sign.
Mm-hmm.
But this, what you just
Yes.
described,
Yes.
for everybody.
Yes, it applies to everybody. It's going to affect a different area of your chart, different department of life. With your finances for some people, your friends for other people, your partners for other people. your career, your reputation. That's what's unique for you. You have to have your chart done or go to a free site to find out exactly what department of life that's going to be affecting. But it is true for all of us. So the eclipses this year, I didn't do the lunar eclipses so much, but you know we're still under the influence of the total solar eclipse from last August, the Great American Eclipse, where the shadow fell across the United States, the first time that happened since 1918. There was a huge pandemic of the flu epidemic. 20 million people died from the flu. In 19, there was an epidemic. It was brought back from Europe to Kansas, to the army, and no one really talked about it. They didn't want to scare people, and it spread like wildfire. So we're under this. I have a picture, I think, of the eclipse. We're under the Great American. We're having an epidemic of gun violence. I think we can say that. I think it's reached the point that it's epidemic now. So it's just to notice that we're in this time period we're still under the effect of this total solar eclipse from last August. We just had this partial solar eclipse, 27 Aquarius, the day after Parkland, and the day before Mueller had started handing down the 13 indictments for the Russian nationals. And the payment to the porn star was real, and the money laundering, and the $30 million to the NRA, and the galvanizing the student march. Eclipses, when they fall on your chart and connect with planets or angles in your chart, are the single most important planetary activity that creates change in your life. That's true for everybody. But it's not going to be, if you have this degree, 27 Aquarius, like the United States moon does. The moon of the United States is 27, that's the people of the United States, is 27 degrees of Aquarius. That eclipse in February and also the one in August have been affecting the American people. That's what's happened. In the August eclipse, it was opposite. It was in 29 Leo, and we got a big surprise when Mr. Trump won. The eclipse came opposite the American people, the moon, that's the public, American public. We have a very innate Aquarian attitude, equality for everybody. That's what's in our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. But in the February 15th, it was in an opposite placement, and it stirred the women's movement between August and February. We have had an awakening on a gigantic level about the people, women. Moon is the women, and of the children, the high schoolers. It's just cascading now. What's going on in terms of people being upset and marching on, and picketing and striking. The kids want to strike, and this is, we're waking up because of what, it's part of the cycle. And there's a July 13th eclipse, is at 20 degrees of Cancer. This is, it's a power disruptor. It's opposite Pluto. Shifts in power are likely then. Most of the time, where the shadow is where you feel the effects of the eclipse the most. This is at the southernmost tip of Australia, which is not very heavily populated. But we will, if your birthday is July 13th, when you have an eclipse on your birthday, you're going to be changing your life. Your purpose of your life is going to change. August 11th is another one. That 18 Leo, this was a repeat of a very powerful eclipse from August 99, when there was that massive earthquake in Turkey and the Bosnia crisis was going on. This is visible. I have pictures of the visibility. This is where the total eclipses occur all over the world. This is 2001 to 2025. And you can see here's the one in August that went this way across the United States. We're going to have another one in 2024 across the United States. We haven't had it, remind you, we haven't had an eclipse since 1918 that fell across the United States. But these are the dates so we know that the activity in the world, we can look and see where the shadow of the total eclipses fall, where on the earth it falls, in order to find out where the most activity is going to be. This is the partial solar eclipse for February 15th, and the shadow fell over across Europe, and We talked about this a little, but the eclipse this was the bookend eclipse. It means there was opposite bookends from the one in August. And we talked about this, but this is where the shadow of the eclipse fell, and Europe has been having a very difficult time in terms of the weather. Here's the eclipse on July 13th. It's across the southernmost tip of Antarctica. That's where the shadow falls. That's where we can expect something to occur from there. In that situation, you might see that, oh, there's, more ice melting, or maybe some scientific, something, or they discover something. That kind of, doesn't have to be anything negative with eclipses. I don't want to put panic in your voice. There can be something good that arises, even in your lives too. They're superstitious. We have a kind of a collective unconscious memory of eclipses as being bad, but it's not always bad. If you have an eclipse on your Jupiter, you can suddenly rise to the highest accolades in your profession. You get a promotion, you get a raise. Eclipses are not, but the effects with them, things change suddenly. And so you're not prepared for it in a way. This is the partial of 2018 on August 11th, if your birthday's there. This is Northeast Asia and Northern Europe, where it'll be affected. Now this is a simpler thing, understanding the trend change in 2018. Here are the 12 signs, and there are 3 fire signs, 3 water. Fire is your spirit. I'm getting up and going, fire. It's like the rooster. Sag, Aries, Leo, you've got fire. Water is Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. Those are your emotional, those are your feeling people. Those are the people that come and help other people. Taurus, earth sign, they're concerned with material well-being. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Taurus wants to hold on to things, Virgo wants to make sure there's a good counting, and Capricorn wants to make sure it's useful for the common good. And Aquarius is an air sign, Libra, and Gemini and Aquarius are air signs. There are about ideas, about relationships. We all have all 12 signs in us someplace. We're all made up of a combination of 12 signs. Everybody has a little Virgo someplace. I have it in my 4th house. I like to take a little toothbrush, 4th house is the home, and meticulously, clean the electric toothbrush, so that you get all that gook out of it. That's a Virgo trait. That's a Virgo trait, and I have it in my home. I like to have that in my home, that it's very clean, okay? So, and we all have, your sun, you generally know where your sun sign is, what your sun sign is, but rest assured, we are all composite of different strengths and weaknesses in all 12 signs. And we're changing elements. We're changing elements in 2000. It's been fire and air in 2017. We're moving to earth and water now in 2018. More emotional, more spiritual, more caring, compassionate. Water's compassionate. You see someone on the street and you want to give them whatever they need at that moment. Those kind of yearnings should be developing in us this year. This is just a little montage to understand the size of Jupiter compared to Earth. And Jupiter is a planet that makes things bigger. I'm going to skip these. This is how to explain astrology if we have time. We will do that at the end, but I don't want to exhaust you completely. I know this is a lot. So planets are going to be changing signs, like I showed you in the beginning. There's going to be and because each planet has a different time cycle around the Earth. Sun moves 365 quarter days. We know the sun's not moving, we know it's the Earth, but we're on the Earth, and we observe, and that's all astrologers did in the old days. They have to observe. They observe. Venus is rising in the morning, and sun rises in the morning, sets, and they all take the planets, the wanderer stars, all take the same arc across the sky. But like I said before, Pluto takes 247 years to come completely around the sun, and Mercury's is less than a year. But planets change signs. Now what happened when Jupiter went into Scorpio, October 11th? This is just redundant. You've probably exhausted yourselves with what's been going on. Scorpio rules money, things you share with other people, assets, investments, taxes, debt, taking money from others, either openly or secretly, affairs of the dead, emotional trauma, psychological crises, it rules sexual matters. So we've just had this enormous flood of women's allegations against men and working for, I don't have to go, this is other things that happened then too. This was the day after Mueller made his first indictments on October 27th. Republican, the special election in Alabama's election that Ray Moore he lost. The Paradise Papers, but the consortium of the journalists, the universities, people, the corporations are putting money offshore. Millions of dollars have been launching offshore. Our tax bill, they, ran that through, so the rich are going to get, apparently, I don't know, we'll see what happens, but the cut tax cuts for the rich. And the cascading sexual harassment. This is all have to do with Jupiter, changed signs, went into Scorpio. All this happened. Pluto changed signs in 2008. And then we had the financial crisis erupt in 2008 and when Obama was elected. Right away, planets change signs and something big occurs. Especially with Pluto rules over those who have power, and it's changing its signs means changing power positions. Financial crisis, suddenly the big banks were not too big, they failed. Think of the Lehman Brothers, some banks completely disappeared. And Obama was elected. Whoever thought in this country we could, elect a black man? It was unbelievable. So that's Capricorn, that's planets changing signs, we are open for a different order, some different experiences. Capricorn rules business now because Pluto's in Capricorn. Pluto rules business and financial corporations, governmental agencies, established entities like churches, banks, large industries like housing, travel, leaders of countries. And Saturn has moved into Capricorn now. The next slide talks about that. Saturn rules accountability, responsibility, what stands the test of time, what is essential, restructuring. Saturn moved into Capricorn in December, right at Christmas time. So we have Jupiter moved into Scorpio in October. We have Pluto had moved into Capricorn in 2008. That was a big eruptions. And then Saturn moved in December, around Christmas time, December 20th. Saturn is called, the last time was in 1988 to 91. You can go back in your life and find out what was happening between 88 and 91 to know what these next 2.5 years are going to be like for you with Saturn and Capricorn. Saturn in Capricorn is the Grim Reaper, the Lord of Karma, Father Time, and the Taskmaster. Saturn is the planet that limits you for good, structures you. Bones and skin are ruled by Saturn. Makes you do what is necessary, provides concrete manifestation, provides boundaries, and enforces the law. There's a contraction that occurs with Saturn in Capricorn. We will give credit and acknowledgement where it's due, and you will get what you have earned. If you've been working hard and not getting acknowledgement, when Saturn comes in Capricorn, it's time for you to get acknowledged. On the other hand, if you're in your place that you don't deserve, you will be shown the door. Time's up. So this is just a quick thing. We don't have to go through this too much, but last time Saturn was in Capricorn, it was these are big years, because the structures, the corporate world changed, banks changed, the walls came down in Berlin, the reunification of Germany, you had Tiananmen Square. These were big events. The war on drugs began with death penalties. Al-Qaeda was formed in August of 1988. The Soviet Union collapsed. And the internet was introduced. What can we can expect from Saturn staying in Capricorn these next 2.5 years? Aging process will be invigorated, more study of time, breakthroughs in dentistry, stem cell cavity filling, I saw that, stem cell cavity fillings, prosthesis, prosthetics, ideas on the table that can become crystallized during this time, restructuring in banking, military, big farm, will reap what they have sown, and maturity is honored. Us elder people are going to be more recognized with Saturn in Capricorn, because Saturn rules time, rules old age. And there will be more of a nod to the wisdom from that experience has given us older people. So in your own personal life, what's your reputation, your life direction, your career? How are you seen in the public? What structures do you need to put in place to create a lasting, fulfilling, and material satisfactory endeavor? Astrologer Wonder Girl, she's a young woman. It's obviously going to apply differently to a 70-year-old than it is going to apply to a 25-year-old. But because you all have Capricorn, some department of life, you have Capricorn. And in that house, in that department of life, for these next 2 years, 2.5 years, there's going to be a restructuring. There's going to be consolidation. There's going to be a contraction. Another big sign change is a big year. Uranus moves into Taurus, May 16th until November 7th. Then it backtracks, goes retrograde. And then finally, March 7th, just about a year from now, it's going to go into Taurus for good. Taurus is the sign of the bull, the stock market. Taurus. Uranus, here's the girl. She's confronting the bull. The last time that Uranus was in Taurus, which was 84 years ago, because Uranus takes 84 years to go around, FDR was president since 1932, and Hitler rose to power in 1933. The battle for the moral and economic high ground began, democracy or fascism. Hitler thought America was a loser because of the Jews and the blacks. He did not calculate how strong FDR and Winston were together. We went off the gold standard, banks closed, and the Depression set in. Uranus rules change, revolutions, and Taurus is values, banks, what something is worth, possessions. And something to remember, the day that Uranus went into Aries, March 11, 2011, was the day of the Japanese earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear disaster. When Uranus changed signs, went into Aries, big waking up for the planet. Aries starts process over again, beginning of the zodiac. Aries is the Mars.
When does it happen?
May 16th.
This year?
Yeah. Taurus, Uranus changes signs.
And how long does it go for?
It's going to be there until 7 years. It's going to be there from, it backtracks a little bit. May 16th to November 7th, Uranus is going to be in Taurus. It's going to change what we're valuing. And then after, the Bitcoin business, all that stuff, that's just doing away with the banks. Sounds crazy, but there's going to be an upset because Uranus brings upsetment, and Taurus is what we value, our possessions, what we hold on to. So, and a year from now, it goes into Taurus for good until 2026. You all have Taurus someplace in your life. There'll be a little awakening. Look, you've had it before. You haven't had Uranus in Taurus unless you're 84. But, there's going to be some part of your life that's going to waken up. Now this is my last couple of slides, and I found this lovely astrologer, John Townley. He's one of my generation, I think, and he asked this question: why are there times in history when religious, technological, cultural, ideological, economic, structural changes are made and perpetuated, and other times when not? And if you can follow me here, I'm glad I have this little red thing. This is a simplified, I just put Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn in this picture. And this is March 4th, 1933, when FDR was inaugurated. And the point here is Saturn, these are the outer planets. Uranus, Pluto, we talked about them, and Neptune, we've talked about them. They are the cultural planets. That's the big sociological, the big changes affecting all of us. We have no control over. And Saturn is the government. And when the government is not working for the big social, cultural drifts and the patterns, it's outside of the orbit. Hope you can follow this. This is December 4th, December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, obviously. And now Saturn's not over here anymore. Saturn has moved down and is just about ready to go inside the orbit of its Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. It's called nesting. When this planet Saturn is this is the government, is way out here, there's no permanent status quo that occurs, and that was from, during the 33 to here, before then. But at this point, when we entered the war, Saturn began to be inside of the orb of these three planets, and government is working for the changes, the big changes that need to occur. This was the fight, democracy for fascism. It was a big, some of you here remember that. I have a great deal of respect for the greatest generation. This is not, apparently, the slide is off the screen, but this is when Reagan took oath. And I'm sorry you can't see this, but the Saturn was connected inside the orb of the larger planets, meaning that his Reaganomics, we're still having the effects of the Reaganomics, his conservative approach, and the tax cuts for the wealthy and all of that. So the point here, I'm not going to go into too much, this is the history, but the historic changes occurs when Saturn comes to the outer planets, sometimes, however, at great cost, but not always. So here we are in December 20th. Saturn has just entered Capricorn, we just talked about, 0 degrees, Capricorn, 0 minutes, and it's about ready to go to be connected with inside, it's nesting inside, it's going to, when it gets to Pluto, which is going to be 2020, it's going to be inside. That means the government, Saturn equals government, is going to be working for the greater social good. It hasn't been up to this point, okay? Based on planetary movements. This is what was going on in that time, in December of, what did I put up here? I can't read that now. Oh yeah, this was when Saturn went into Capricorn. I might have witnessed that. Too fat thanks to NAFTA, and the vaccine causes harm. I might have had these slides out of order, I apologize. But this is about Big Farm coming to terms with what chemicals were going into our bodies, and about contracting our food issues. In January of 2020, Saturn comes into the orb of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. It's that little nest, that little bundled together there. And this is when the next period, when the big social, technological, scientific, spiritual, cultural changes will be permanent. The government will be actually working for those big progressive changes. Starting in, this is January 20th, this is the inauguration day in 2020. Makes, well, if you read this, it would appear that he's not getting elected in 2020. Now, because the government has to take on a certain responsibility here.
And inauguration
20, you're right, it should be 2021. But it's the same thing. It will be even a year later. Saturn's inside the orbit of Pluto. Thank you for pointing that out. Here's 2032, and Saturn's going to leave. So we have from 20 to 32, when the government is going to be working with the progressive movement and helping people. And when in 2032, Saturn's going to keep going here, leaving Gemini, moving to Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, and moving out of orb. So these are the last couple of slides. What's happening in the U.S.? We talked about this, Pluto moving into Capricorn. We're having an identity crisis is what's happening. We're having a big Pluto identity crisis. Who are we? What's the role of government? Pluto hasn't been in Capricorn since before the American Revolution. Because it takes 250 years for Pluto to go around the sun. So what's the role of government? Transiting Neptune on the progressed sun in the United States, symbolizing our spell of addiction, the delusion, spiritual growth, fake news. Neptune is that that one, you're upside down cross, you don't know what's going on. That's what's happening to the United States. Our chart is not that easy. The moment that we were born, there are many charts for it, but July 4, 1776, about 519, we have fire rising, and there is lots of water. And 4 planets in water, Cancer. We're a Cancer country, but we have fire rising. Water has a tendency to put out the fire. Any country that begins this systematic obliteration of native peoples and the enslavement of others is not going to have an easy time of it. We have karma to pay for all our beginnings. This is all what's happening in the U.S. You don't have to know what it says, but it's the progressed moon, which is the mood of the people, is chasing Saturn, and there's a weight bearing down on the American people right now. Trump's heart hits all the negative aspects of the U.S. natal chart, and that's what's happening. He's in our identity crisis. We have elected, in God's wisdom, a man who is triggering all of the parts of ourselves that we don't like. Now that has a purpose in the long run. There's no making America great again. The USA has no fewer than 4 planets apparently going retrograde, and even progressed Mars in 2006 is retrograde, which means that any military action we take is doomed to fail. We have Mercury is just finished going retrograde, since 1994 was retrograde, Jupiter went retrograde, and won't be going to 2025. Neptune retrograde and Saturn are retrograde. We have all of the planets going backwards in the United States' chart, which means we have to go backwards, look more introspective. Here's the eclipse of the shadow from August. Maybe I'll skip this. This is more, this big cultural shift. I want to give you time to ask questions, but there's another big cultural shift occurring with Jupiter and Saturn coming to 0 degrees of Aries in in Aquarius, 0 degrees of Aquarius, December 2020, starts another 20-year cycle in air signs, and it means the value from then on in is going to be in human relationships. It's going to be in ideas. We're no longer going to be Earth sign in Jupiter and Saturn. We're in May of 2000. It was their last conjunction together in Taurus and Earth sign. These Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions occur in Earth, the same element, for 200 years. They've been occurring since the Industrial Revolution in Earth signs, these cultural changes. From December 2020, next 200 years, we're in air signs. That means the value is going to be in human relationships, taking care of one another, ideas. Your gold is ideas now. The ideas are springing forth. And we've seen beginnings of this now. But it's a big cultural shift when, if you think about the Industrial Revolution, what happened to this country when people left the farms and came into the cities and we started manufacturing everything. It was a huge problem for everybody. We're in this turmoil of that kind of shift even now. Thoughts to leave you with? I said that already. The important thing for 2018 is learn to be not dependent on the physicality. Learn to, not use your watch, for instance. Just little things. Wake up if you can. Wake up when your spirit moves you. When you have an intuition or gut feeling to do something, go ahead and do it. Don't rely on outside authority. Get your own impulses strong inside of you, and your own intuition, and rely on that intuition. Rely on the dreams. Remember your dreams. This is help from the spiritual world, and if we attune ourselves to that, you can have answers to the problems. Believe me, you have solutions to things that can bug you all day long, and you think you have to come up with a solution, but you don't. You say, I need a solution for this, and you have a dream, and you wake up and you remember the dream, and there's the solution to the problem. That's the kind of miracles that we have to expect now in desensitizing ourselves to. It's not what you see anymore, it's what you can't see. that's important. And this is another cultural shift that we're having, which is difficult to talk about. Really can only be experienced. We have a part to play. It's our last slide. We contribute our perspective to the whole. The choice is up to us to what to focus on. And you turn into fear and anxiety of what we see and read in front of us, or tune into the potential that wants to manifest that we cannot see, but only intuit, so that we all are living in peace. Being able to hold two different patterns in our brain, not black or white, but gray. Very important. You see the chaos in some place in the political life, and you can't take that into your own personal life. You have to hold two different, that's the chaos, that's those people that are running the government are a little chaotic right now. And that's the final picture of what I thought this time was like, not knowing, there's nothing visible to hold on to, and but yet we're mirroring the spiritual world, the heaven. I don't know how you define it for yourselves, and we each have to come to their own understanding of God and the nature of our lives, the meaning of our lives, the invisible, what we can't see. And we're all, the more we each of us individuate that, the better the collective will be. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Hey, I know you'll take some questions, will you take some questions, but I just want to say, in case some people have to go, I'm not sure we've ever gotten such a thorough examination of any subject. So I'd like you to come back if you're interested and willing to do that maybe next year, to sort of back up a little bit for those who may be interested in knowing a few more of the basics. Are there any of you in that category here tonight? Yeah, okay.
You mean Astrology 101?
Well, kind of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, and we all benefit.
I also want to mention that we have videotaped this, so that within a month or so, it will be on the library's website. It can be hard to figure out how to watch things, so ask us if you need help figuring it out. So you can go back to this and watch it over and over and get all that information. Okay, so we'll let questions happen. Thanks.
You were troopers, really. This is complicated stuff, so I admire you greatly. Yes, sir.
Is astrology always consistent? Do all astrologers always agree on most major things, or are there different schools?
Repeat the question.
The question is a good question. Do all astrologers agree, or are there different schools? There are different schools. There are pretty much, it's a really interesting question, because this astrologer has her birth natal chart, and if you went to another astrologer, you came to me, some part of my natal chart is, and the moment that we're meeting, are going to connect with you in a different way should you go to another astrologer a year from now and with a different moment in time. That's on that level. But also in astrology itself, you can do meteorology, weather forecasting with astrology. You do mundane, charts. Countries have natal moments when they're born. Leaders have natal moments when they're born. There's a whole body of financial astrologers. The stock market, they watch the stock market based on the planetary movements. What am I missing? There's natal astrology, and then there's your transits, what's happening to you in your life, that on top.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, but if he goes to you, then he goes to someone else, they're going to tell him a lot of the same things about his nature,
Yes,
right?
if you're a Taurus, there's certain general patterns to Taurus. You're a little, stubborn in a good way, but stubborn, you want to hold on to things. Yes, there are certain patterns. Venus always rules the same, governs the same department of your life. The order of the planet, the signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, that remains the same. If you're in this, there are certain things, the basics that are the same.
Are there certain astrologers in history who stand out and have followings that go down through time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, Ptolemy in early Egypt. They've been doing astrology since thousands of years. Astrology and prostitution are the oldest careers on the planet. There's been a resurgence of Hellenistic astrology now from those, and the young people now are reading the Greek and Latin texts and getting the original sources of that. But there's certain highlights of, there's Valens, who's of Egyptian, I don't know, he was raised in Egypt. I'm trying to think. Benjamin Franklin was an astrologer. Johannes Kepler was an astrologer. You don't talk about that. You know, Leonardo da Vinci. I just read the biography of Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, the painting of the Last Supper, there are 12 apostles there. Each one has a connection with a different sign of the zodiac. 12 apostles, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 tribes of Israel. You know, all of this is all of the meaning of life gets layered on, but certain generations take away, you know, certain aspects that they don't understand or they don't. And this is what this generation is about, really, putting that meaning, that layered meaning back. It's a really good question, and it has a lot of different, there are many astrologers, yes. But astrology got a bad reputation, you know, in the mid you know, and it still has. In fact, when I started, I was almost embarrassed to be an astrologer, but I can't be anymore because it's so true for me. And I see it working, and it gives me so much comfort. Yes?
So, I mean, this is kind of a basic, simple question, but scientists believe that Pluto is not a planet anymore, right? So, does that affect astrology as we see it today?
No, that's a very legitimate question. Whether they call it an asteroid or a planet doesn't make any difference. It's orbiting around the sun in our galaxy, and it doesn't make that much difference. It might be very small, but it has an enormous effect, considering, you know, what happened when Pluto went into Capricorn and we had Obama elected and the financial meltdown. You know, so there's resonances on Earth for these planetary, and it's all one. You know, what's happening in the sky is happening in our lives here. We're all interconnected, and each of us is interconnected. That's what we're trying to work on now, this interconnectedness, and that's what the Aquarian Age is all about. That's what Aquarius is all about. That's what this country was founded on, those wonderful ideals that we had. But unfortunately, they didn't apply to half the population. So, yes,
Is Saturn in Capricorn right now?
yes,
It is.
yes.
You know when it began?
December 20th.
Okay.
You've been a wonderful audience.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.